Welcome to the Florida Gardener Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer, and today's episode is a listener request from Lauren. Lauren writes, "Hi, Jennifer. I'm a newbie gardener from here in South Florida and found your podcast recently. It has been so helpful with explaining some basics and explaining a lot about what grows well in our climate. I loved your episode about cut flowers and wondered if you could do an episode for achieving a Gothic garden in our climate. Suggestions for dark and moody plants that can survive our specific weather would be wonderful, or even some native plant suggestions. I recently found a black diamond crepe myrtle at my local big box garden center and was awed by the dark foliage and blooms. Thank you for your time and for creating such a helpful resource with your podcast. Sincerely, Lauren." You guys, say no more. I live for October. I even have a Dracula purse, which I rock year-round. If I could live in an old Gothic Victorian house and have overcast skies every day, I would. And if Frankenstein was my neighbor, even better. It may sound really peculiar, but there is something very cozy about that whole aesthetic to me. When Lauren reached out requesting this episode, it was a no-brainer for me. So thanks, Lauren, for the creative and unique request. I also want to credit the National Garden Bureau, as some of the information in today's episode was sourced from them. Goth gardens are so great because they let you embrace your dark side with cryptic and moody elements that can look terrific all year. Yes, this isn't just for Halloween. So, for those of us who lean more toward the creepy and mysterious rather than the pretty and perky, this episode is for you. Without further ado, let's dive into my favorite Gothic garden plants and design tips. The first plant on the list is black coral elephant ears. Oh my goodness, you've never seen an elephant ear like this. It has gorgeous, large, deep, black heart-shaped leaves. So lovely. This guy is pretty flexible with regards to sun exposure, but if you want the deepest, darkest color, shade is best. In the shade, mine was quite literally black. When I moved them into the sun, they lightened up a bit, more of a dark bronze color. And FYI, you can purchase black coral elephant ears as bulbs online if you have a difficult time finding a mature rooted plant at the store. Next up on the list is the canna lily, specifically these two, Black Knight and Tropicana Black. Those are two different varieties of canna lily. These are absolutely stunning plants. Depending on the type, the color on these large dramatic leaves varies. I've seen some with deep purple to black foliage and others with dark bronze to chocolate foliage. Cannas need some room to really showcase their splendor, growing 4 to 5 feet tall and 36 feet wide. I really love when they are planted in mass. Group a few together to really make an impact. Canna lilies love the sun, so if you're low on shade, definitely add this one to your goth garden list. As a bonus, it also has vibrant red or orange flowers depending on the variety. You can also grow cannas in shadier conditions, just know that it might not bloom as much. This is another plant that you can purchase as a bulb if you can't find a garden center that carries them. And all cannas love water, so make sure you keep yours well watered, especially during the summer months. Number 3 is the poly elephant ear, also known as the African mask plant. It's commonly sold and grown as a houseplant. However, in Florida, lucky us, they can be grown outside year-round, as long as you have a space that receives shade to part shade. They stay pretty small and compact. And talk about a unique moody plant. It has fleshy, dark green to blackish, arrow-shaped leaves with waved edges. A thick, creamy white midrib runs down the center, and then creamy white veins run along either side. This is probably a stretch, but the foliage on this one reminds me of an X-ray. Like if you took an X-ray of an elephant ear, I swear it would look like this. Or maybe it's just me. Next up are bromeliads. There are some striking black colored bromeliads out there, and if you're lucky enough to get your hands on one of them, definitely give yourself a high five. They're pretty rare, but hey, that just adds to the mystique. They are all in the Neoregelia family. Here are a few to get you started. Neoregelia Dark Panther, Neoregelia Black Tracker, and Neoregelia Black Satin. If you have difficulty sourcing one of those, there are a ton of more commonly sold burgundy bromeliads that are dark enough to fit into a goth garden too. For something extra unique that checks the Gothic plant box, look up Acmea Black Chantini. It has long, dark chocolate to black colored leaves, which are heavily banded in a frosted white. It reminds me of a zebra, or, more in line with our theme today, Beetlejuice's black and white suit. Mixing a few of these black and white striped guys with the black bromeliads would look so neat. Next up are the cordyline, aka tea plants. I couldn't choose just one here. For those unfamiliar with the name, you have definitely seen tea plants in the landscape. You're probably most familiar with the Hawaiian tea plant. The trunk of this evergreen shrub looks almost palm-like and can grow 10 feet tall. The most common are the red and pink-leafed ones, such as the red sister Hawaiian tea plant. When pruned back frequently, they look lush and beautiful. Anyway, so imagine this plant, but with very dark, dramatic foliage. Cordyline fruticosa, Black Magic, is a shade-loving tea plant with striking purple-black foliage. Cordyline fruticosa Karuba Black, another shade lover, has glossy dark purple foliage, which almost looks black from a distance. Those with sunnier gardens, check out Cordyline australis Black Knight. The strappy leaves emerge deep burgundy and mature to purplish black. This cordyline doesn't look like the Hawaiian tea plants you see in a lot of Florida landscapes. It has a short stem, and the leaves on this one are thin and grow upright. A hardy, low-maintenance plant that makes for a dramatic accent in the garden. And it handles full sun like a champ. Number 6 is black mondo grass. Out of all the plants on the list, I think black mondo grass might be my favorite. We've all seen green mondo grass or monkey grass lining a pathway or walkway. It's a common ground cover down here. But have you seen black mondo grass? This is one of those plants that really is black. It can't be real. This unusual ornamental grass provides us year-round color. It forms tight, matted clumps in its bed, growing 8 to 12 inches tall and wide depending on the exact variety. The native origins of black mondo grass are in Japan, but it's traveled around the globe. And fun fact, although mondo grass looks like grass, it's actually related to the lily. They spread slowly to fill in an area. You can also divide your mondo grass tubers annually to create new plants. Here in Florida, they do best in part sun to shade. If they are planted in a sunnier spot, just make sure they aren't getting hit with our intense afternoon sun during the summer. The crepe myrtle tree has been a favorite with southern gardeners for a very long time. You may have noticed the black leaf crepe myrtles in your garden center recently. And holy moly, they really bring the wow factor. Their foliage is amazing. A very deep, dark brown to black. Just like the traditional crepes, they are resistant to heat and drought and have vibrant flowers produced over a long period. Now, disclaimer, most black leaf crepe myrtles are not bred to grow big. They are more like short bushes. They don't have a tree form. So if you're looking for a crepe that will grow to be large and have an attractive canopy for shade, this lady ain't it. But if you just want a nice specimen or focal point for your goth garden, definitely consider her. Number 8 is purple fountain grass. I love me some purple fountain grass. It adds texture, movement, and low-maintenance color to the landscape. It's a large, striking ornamental grass with deep burgundy to purple leaf blades and soft, fuzzy-like flowers. I envision the foxtail plumes being swayed by a gentle almond breeze. Next up is the purple sweet potato vine, which is a fast-growing, heat-loving vine with showy dark purple to black foliage. Use it as a ground cover in a garden bed or as a stunning trailer in large containers or hanging baskets. I've seen some with deeply lobed foliage and others that have heart-shaped leaves, so it just depends on the variety. And don't confuse this vine with the edible sweet potato plant, which also grows well here. While related, the one we are discussing is grown and sold as an ornamental plant. Oh, the cranberry hibiscus. This isn't one everyone is familiar with, but imagine the sun-loving hibiscus we all know, but with dark burgundy foliage and palmate leaves similar to red maple. This plant is gorgeous. Not gonna lie, it might just be my new favorite hibiscus, Goth Garden or not. Okay, so not all plants have to be black in a Goth garden. In fact, I'd say you'll make more of an impact if you incorporate a few different colors other than black. The key, in my opinion, is it needs to be subtle. I like incorporating flowers and foliage with muted colors, gray, sage green, different shades of tan, maybe a little white or cream, and the secret ingredient, a splash of crimson. You sort of want it to look eerie and dead in a way, but with effort, right? Like it was clearly designed and intentional. A well-kept cemetery, and then something happens and it's neglected, but only for a few months. A controlled chaos. Something that immediately comes to mind for me is white fountain grass. A gorgeous, large ornamental grass with white plumes. The blades of grass turn tan and crunchy when they die. They look like straw, and they stay intact. It takes them a very long time to break down and come off the clump. So unless you're hard pruning your fountain grass, cutting it all the way down, it's going to be a mix of muted green blades and tan color blades at all times, which I think is really pretty. Anyway, my point to this is envision having these dark moody plants and then adding something like this fountain grass. The fact that it looks a little dead or forgotten is perfect. It also reminds me of fall, like a real fall outside of Florida. Leaves starting to change color, eventually becoming brown. So you see where I'm going with this. And structure is so critical. Selecting a color palette is only one small piece when it comes to proper garden design. Plants with interesting, spooky structure are perfect for a Goth garden. Plants that are wispy, spiky, thorny, or twiggy. Think a leafless tree in the middle of winter. One of the neatest plants for structures in a Goth garden in Florida is the pencil cactus, which is a succulent shrub with long, skinny, twig-like stems. In ground, it can grow up to 30 feet tall. However, you can prune it to keep it smaller if you'd like, or leave it potted to restrain its growth. I'm not saying go out and buy this, but I also think of the weeping willow tree, or the bottle brush tree if you're in South Florida. We will get more into hardscapes in a little bit, but envision this. It's a cloudy, dark day. You're walking down a meandering path, and on either side of you are pencil cacti and carnivorous Venus flytraps, opening and closing their mouths, hungry for their next meal. Ahead, you see an old wrought iron arbor covered in Spanish moss and tillandsias. You walk through it, and there is a thick fog rising from a pond with a single weeping willow hanging over it. Surrounding the pond are clumps of white fountain grass. You can hear the rustling of its straw-like blades blowing in the wind. Some other plants I would consider for a Goth garden that aren't black or really dark are, as you might assume now, carnivorous plants. Florida has dozens of species of carnivorous plants, more than any other state in the U.S. The Venus flytrap and the pitcher plant are two that you can look up to get you started. Venus flytraps have unique snap-trap leaves that close rapidly when triggered by an insect's movements. Once closed, the plant secretes enzymes to break down the captured prey. Pitcher plants have elongated leaves shaped like pitchers. These leaves contain a pool of digestive enzymes at the bottom, enticing insects to enter and eventually be digested. Seriously, what is cooler than having one of these guys in your Goth garden? They definitely look like something that should be growing outside a haunted house on a hill. And disclaimer, most carnivorous plants naturally grow in bogs and wetlands. So in our yard, they need a moist environment and lots of light. They're best grown in containers with a moist medium or in rain gardens. Another plant to consider is the rose. The iconic rose holds a special place in the hearts of many, and their rich history is steeped in fascinating folklore and superstitions. They can be difficult to grow with our humidity, but if you can find a Florida hardy variety, I think adding this classic thorny flowering shrub would be very fitting, especially one with rich, deep, blood red blooms. Next up is the bleeding heart vine. I love this vine for a goth garden. If you have a shade to part sun spot, consider this one. It has large dark green leaves and unique white and crimson flowers. It can be trained as a vine up against a trellis or on an arbor. Alternatively, you could let it ramble as a low-growing shrub on the ground, which I just think would look really neat in a goth garden. FYI, this vine comes in another color combination, pink and purple, which is beautiful too, but I think the red and white would be better for a goth garden. We also can't forget the aloe plant, which is a perfect goth garden plant with its thick, fleshy leaves that are serrated with small teeth. The dragon tree is another fantastic option. Looking like a small palm tree, the dragon plant has a narrow stem with tufts of thin, arching, sword-shaped leaves. The leaves give the dragon tree a distinct, spiky appearance that makes the plant the perfect specimen for an eye-catching goth display. Another great option is the African milk tree cactus, which is sometimes called the red African milk tree because its foliage turns a deep red. This is another tall-growing succulent, but it can be trimmed to fit a space or keep it potted. With its large burgundy spikes, this plant just looks so edgy to me. We also have the crown of thorns. It's a bit odd-looking, with the inch-long, sharp spines covering the otherwise bare stems, and just a few leaves on the tips of the branches. But this is exactly why it's perfect for a goth garden. Along with the offbeat appearance, crown of thorns has beautiful blooms and is one of the few succulents that flowers most of the year. We have discussed a lot of succulents that are tall or grow to be large, but there are many small succulents that you could add to a goth garden. Check out Echeveria succulents. Echeveria is a large genus of succulents, most of which stay pretty small and low growing. And for something a bit softer in appearance, try adding some saucy wine salvia. Its striking burgundy red flower spikes are perfect for today's theme. And like all salvias, this guy is a low-maintenance sun worshiper. Now, you don't want to use all of the plants we've discussed today, obviously. It depends on the size of your space, but pick the ones you like. Make sure you select plants with different growth habits and heights. You don't want all low-growing ground cover plants, for example. You'll have no height in your garden. And if you're working with a balcony, your list will probably be shorter than someone who has a large backyard. Anyway, repeat those same plants throughout your garden multiple times. It'll look cohesive and feel intentional. Repetition is key if you want to create impact in a garden that appears well thought out. And don't be scared to group plants. Grouping, for example, 3 large, beautiful canna lilies is going to do much more for you rather than spacing them out and having a single canna lily here and then there. Okay, so let's talk hardscape. Proper plant selection is only part of what makes a goth garden gothic. You should also consider the hardscape. Now, for us small space balcony gardeners, or maybe you have a strict HOA, do not become overwhelmed with this next part. I encourage you to be creative within the confines of your space. The design tips I'm about to share are provided to spark imagination. We're kind of dream building here. Think of it as a vision board. Take what you want and make it your own. So when I envision a goth garden, I think lots of old stone structures covered in moss, vine-covered crumbling walkways, stone urns, wrought iron arbors and gates, old decommissioned fountains with English ivy trailing out, a brick pathway that meanders. The more twists and turns you incorporate into the layout of your goth garden, the more intriguing it becomes. You wonder what's behind the next curve. I would recommend to check out yard sales, thrift stores, even Facebook Marketplace to find weathered stonework for paths or walls, pergolas with patina, ancient arched doorways. Adding repurposed hardscaping gives your goth garden a sense of history, even if it's brand new to you. Adding traditional Gothic statuary, such as saints, angels, or my favorite, a gargoyle, is almost essential. They give you the creepy feeling that you're being watched. A well-placed gargoyle tucked into a path would definitely startle me. If you decide to mulch your garden beds or a pathway, be bold, and I say go with black mulch for this project. If you have a large mature tree, hang a few rusty cage-like outdoor lanterns from the tree branches. And we're still dreaming here, but if space permits, a well-worn bench nestled under a pergola covered in that white and crimson bleeding heart vine, oh my goodness. I imagine reading the classic Dracula novel by Bram Stoker while sipping Earl Grey tea. If you really want to turn things up a notch, add lighting. You can uplight trees so that they cast spooky shadows. You could also place a spotlight on your favorite garden statue. Lighting helps to give life to the inanimate object as the shadows flicker across the statue's stone face. You can also add pathway lighting along the meandering walkways of the garden, enticing visitors to explore, if they so dare. All right, that wraps up episode 15 of The Florida Gardener. We will see you soon for episode 16. And in the meantime, if you'd like to hire me for a plant consult, virtual or on-site, download one of my Etsy garden templates, or check out my social, you can access everything through my website, rootsredefined.com. That's roots, R-O-O-T-S, redefined, REDEFINED.com. All right, thanks guys. We'll see you again soon.